really enjoyed my stay in Fraser Island. I don't think I brought quite the right fishing tackle, but it's been great fun. Just wanted to share with you this afternoon some of our experience with the diagnostic use of digital pathology. And I'd just like to declare there is a conflict of interest. Omnic's funding was provided for the validation study, which I'm going to talk about in this talk, and they've also provided some seed corn funding for our Centre of Excellence for digital pathology. In 2011, UHCW entered into an agreement with Omnics to provide a digital pathology system suitable for use in diagnosis. And this was based around whole slide imaging of microscope slides and converting those images into computer files, which can then be viewed on a computer workstation, as opposed to the conventional way of using a microscope. The solution was based on our Workload as it existed in 2012, and we were provided with a beta system in 2012 in order to provide train the staff in how to use a system. I'm not sure how familiar you are with digital pathology systems, but this is the Omnic system that we have been using. It's based on two versions of digital slide scanners. There's a high throughput 120 slide scanner over here, which has robotic loading of the slides, and a smaller 4 slide scanner, which is loaded manually. Either way, the scanner works exactly the same in both of these instruments, and the workstations are identical. You get a 2-monitor field, one of which contains the clinical details, and the other demonstrates the histology image for you. Digitizing the workload of a surgical pathology lab presents a number of challenges, really. You really do need rapid scanning of the slides in order to get through the number of slides which are generated. Our laboratory generates 1,000 to 1,200 slides a day, so you need to get through them pretty quickly to do the whole lot. It needs to be integrated with the laboratory LIMS system for obvious reasons, and it has to be stable and provide reasonably fast data transfer to allow for real-time reporting. At the stage we took this project on, this validation step had not been completed. In other words, nobody had adequately demonstrated that pathologists are as good on digital systems as they are with a conventional microscope. So it was an important part of our project to do that. This interesting diagram demonstrates the IT architecture of our system, or so I'm told. The interesting part from my perspective, twofold really with this diagram. I'm not really concerned with what goes on in the middle, but you'll notice that they've taken 2 microscope slides on the left-hand side of the diagram and projected 2 chest radiographs on the diagnostic screens on the right. And you might think that's a basic error, but actually that is the IT view of digital pathology. It is just another imaging system, and very conveniently provides them with a solution for their increasing problem of picture archiving. Digital pathology images are a lot bigger than CT scans and X-rays. So if you follow that line of thinking, you end up with pathology funding the entire picture archiving service for the whole trust. So we haven't gone down that route yet. We are fighting that battle as we speak. The other interesting aspect of this diagram is the link to the AP anatomical pathology laboratory information system down in this corner here, which looks like it was a bit of an add-on, and it was a bit of an add-on to the slide. And it's really important that this works well, and you'll notice the arrow goes both ways. So, and that is important too. You need to be able to get information into your digital pathology system, and also from that system back into the LIMS system. So both front and back end interfaces have to work, and they have to work well. Why did we do digital pathology in Coventry? Well, our trust has, I have absolutely no time for mission statements incidentally, but I happen to think our mission statement is quite clever. It's we care, we achieve, and we innovate. Innovation is seen as a solution, or the major solution really, to providing more for less. That's the board's view in Coventry, and I do agree with it really, that in order to provide for the ever-increasing demands placed on the healthcare system, we are going to have to innovate, because we are not going to get ever-increasing funding to support it. And digital pathology fitted with the overall view that this is a very innovative and new way to do the work. In Coventry, we provide pathology services for a network of hospitals extending from Warwick in the south to Burton up in the north. And therefore, the digital system is seen as a solution for that problem. We saw that it would help remote working and home working, which is a popular thing because pressure for office space is ever increasing. Very significantly, we are a new medical school, and this was seen as a great source of academic study and potential, and we're very interested in exploring that with our colleagues in Warwick University's Computer Science Department. And we have a very enthusiastic consultant workforce in Coventry for digital pathology. This is one of the questions I get asked most often about how we implemented it, is how did I convince my colleagues that this was the right thing to do? And the truth is that I didn't. They wanted to do it, which is seen as unusual. I don't know why that should be, but our pathologists wanted to try this and wanted to do it. And we're a training centre, and we recognise the importance that digital pathology has for training junior pathologists. And all of these facts are true. But the real reason we did it was this guy down the bottom right-hand corner. This is Andy Hardy. He's our chief executive. And Andy's an interesting character. He's been around for quite a while, and he's been our chief executive now for quite a number of years. And I was quite impressed because he was appointed as chief executive after the last one left under a bit of a cloud, having got the trust into a significant financial black hole. And what really impressed me about it was that Andy was the chief finance director at the time. So he's a survivor. And it was Andy who wanted to see digital pathology take off in Coventry, and without his support, we wouldn't have got this project off the ground. And the major reasons were cost, really. The project's going to cost us 1.5 million over the 5-year period that we've timelined it for. And so providing some evidence of return on that investment was perhaps our biggest initial challenge. And secondly, the demonstration that it would work to a standard which would be acceptable for routine use. At this time that we took this on, the FDA had decreed that digital pathology was not Class 1 exempt and required pre-market testing before it could be incorporated. Now, it's still the situation in the US. UK doesn't have an equivalent to the FDA that covers diagnostic instruments of this type, but CPA, or UCAS as it now is, would require validation against our existing technology, as they would with any new development. And so we designed a non-inferiority study to prove this validation. So on the return on investment argument, this was the pie chart which Omnics kindly gave us at the start of the whole project, and they estimate a 13.4% area of what they term workflow opportunities. And this is all about finding slides, really, and getting the slides in the right place at the right time. It may be true, and I think they probably had a picture like this in their mind. I don't know how familiar this is for you, for those working in anatomical pathology labs, but this is our filing tray. And if you want to find a slide in that lot that you need for your MDT meeting, it's clearly going to take you quite a while to do that. Regardless of the efficiencies you can get from just not having to find a physical slide, I think the more important aspect about the return on investment as far as digital pathology is concerned governs really how you control the workflow to your pathologists, who are usually the most expensive part of the department. And this is a diagram loosely based on our department at the time, staffed by 8 consultants, covering a number of subspecialist areas. And the conventional and traditional way of dividing up the work is to pre-allocate it as it gets booked into the lab. So every case comes in, gets allocated to a consultant, and goes through the lab and ends up in their pool in a tray of slides to report at the end of it. And you can manage the amount that's allocated to consultants according to their job plan and so on. And this is a very popular way of doing the task, mainly for that reason. You can control the amount of work that you give to individuals. But the problem is that each case that gets pre-allocated to an individual pathologist can only really be reported by that individual. So when that case comes out of the laboratory, it's waiting for that pathologist, that individual, to do it. And likewise, that individual is waiting for their work to come out of the lab before they can do it. They can't do anyone else's work. And both sides of that equation are inefficient. You lose time on both sides of that equation. So the alternative approach, which is becoming more popular now, is to not pre-allocate specimens to individuals, but to specialty benches. And this is sometimes called the pull system. And in this scenario, each pathologist takes trays from the appropriate subspecialty bench that they're working in. And this means that they are not waiting for individual cases, and individual cases are not waiting for them, and it's seen as a more efficient way, and it is a more efficient way of getting through the work. This is sometimes referred to as level loading. And you can do this without digitization. Digitization is not needed for this, but it does allow you to do it much more easily, and you can indeed, if you want to, have complete control over how these cases are apportioned and worked through the laboratory. And we estimated that adopting this particular system of working would save us, would make a 10% saving in our consultant time, and that's what we put into our business case to support the adoption of digital pathology. But first, the validation of does it work is a big question. And obviously, when you are looking at an interpretive science such as histopathology, you really need a benchmark to start from to show where your internal observer variation or baseline variation is. And for this, we had been collecting for a number of years the returns from our multidisciplinary team or MDT meetings. And this graph shows you the number of MDT meetings which we're supporting in Coventry. It's quite a number of them. And for each of those meetings, we recorded a number of cases that had been reviewed, and if there was a change made to that case which was likely or would probably have had clinical significance to the patient's care. And we collected those over, as I say, over a year. And it turns out that in about 1.2% of cases, when they get reviewed at MDTs, a change is made which is likely to be clinically relevant. So we gave that figure as our baseline variation to our statistical colleagues, and they did some crunching as they do, and they came up with this range of study sizes and power calculations to go with them, of which we chose the 3014 case size, giving us an 80% power to show a difference if there was one. And this study was then based on a double reporting of these cases. So they were reported on glass initially, and then they were reported digitally. And there was a minimum 3-week washout period between the two, just to ensure that pathologists didn't remember the cases. And a research assistant collected the two reports together and identified those where there were any differences. And then every week, actually, a steering group met, went through those cases and decided whether the significances were real. In other words, not just typographical or irrelevant minor changes or difference in terminology, which eventually made the same thing. They decided which ones are real, and if of those which are real, they gave those cases back to the original pathologist to decide which was the correct version, whether it was one on the glass slide or the digital slide. And in doing so, we allocated the ground truth to the system which had got the answer right. We closed this study at the end of the 3,014 cases, which were chosen sequentially, really, from the filing trays. All the subspecialty areas were targeted, and the slides were retrieved, they were recover slipped, they were scanned, and then after the 3-week period was elapsed, they were released to pathologists to re-report. And 14 pathologists took part in this study. 2/3 of these cases were reported by a different pathologist on the digital compared to the glass. The remaining were done by the same pathologist on both, and that very closely mirrors what happens in our routine MDTs. And we'll just run through some images here of how the system actually works. So this is the system in my office. You can see on the left-hand side the cases which are racked up for me to do, and you can see a thumbnail image of the number of slides with each case. We scanned in the request card so that the pathologist had the full amount of detailed clinical history that you get with these cases from time to time to report from. And you'll notice that in cellular pathology we haven't gone to electronic requesting yet. The rest of the pathology has, but CellPath was excluded, and it was excluded because it was thought to be too difficult to convert the information provided on these request forms into an electronic version. The main reason being that you wouldn't get the diagram that the surgeon's drawn on the form. As you can see, this is just an outline image of a breast where this core biopsy has been taken from. It's a shame because I think we've lost an opportunity there, but that's for later discussion, I think. So here's a transbronchial biopsy. It's got 2 slides on it on the tray, and you can look at the image on the screen. There's a thumbnail at the top right-hand corner which tells you whereabouts you are on the slide and allows you to move very quickly between what we call different levels, different cuts of the section on the slide. And here's this transbronchial biopsy showing pneumocystis. The alveoli are filled with this pink, homogeneous, slightly granular, vacuolated, foamy exudate. And when you do the silver special stain, you can see the pneumocystis organisms packing out those alveolar spaces. So you can see all the detail that you need to do on the digital system. You can also use some of the tools which come along with the kit. So this is what we call the Mdt Tool. It allows you to put a blue dot on the slide where there are regions of interest, in this case an area of microcalcification in a breast core biopsy. And you can, there's tools for measuring distances. So here's a case of melanoma where there's a measurement to the radial margin that's been taken, and another case of squamous carcinoma of the skin this time with the depths of invasion, tumour size and deep margin all measured. And that makes, it does make measuring things a bit more straightforward. So when we finished the study, we found we did have a number of, this just shows you the outline of cases which were included in the study, all the subspecialist teams on the left, and a number of cases which we included from them. You'll notice we overpitched. We just did 3,017 cases, and that worked out in terms of data to be 2.4 terabytes of data. So we predict that our annual slide archive is going to be in the region of 22 terabytes, which is considerably less than we thought it would be at the start of this project. We were anticipating it to be around 30 terabytes. The slides scanned were mainly at times 40. The vast majority, times 40 is the default setting for this system. You could override it and scan at times 60 for selected cases, and we did that for all the renal biopsies, and the stains were microorganisms, as I'll show you in a minute. But at the end of this study, we showed that there was no significant difference really in the number of changes we'd made in digital compared to what we would have expected to make if we had reported them all out on glass. And this was, and the figures were remarkably similar, whether it was the same pathologist reporting the cases or different pathologists reporting the cases. Where we did have differences, I think there were 23 in total, which are relevant clinically significant differences. The majority of those were pretty typical for cases which have just been re-examined by a pathologist and something new seen that wasn't seen on the first time around. And they're listed here for you. Of interest, I think, a number of cases of, or two actually, of oral candidiasis were missed on the original glass report, but picked up on the digital scan. And in fact, the ground truth for these errors lay equally between glass and digital. So we conclude that there is absolutely no reason why you can't use digital pathology for your routine diagnostic work. There are a couple of areas where you need to be slightly cautious. And this was one. This is Helicobacter pylori, Helicobacter infection in a gastric biopsy. And on the left-hand side of the screen, it's scanned at time 60, where you can clearly make out the H. pylori organisms present on the mucosal surface. Sorry, the arrow is not working on this screen. You can see them on the right-hand side as well, but you can't recognize them confidently as being H. pylori, at least I can't. And the pathologists which reported this case out missed these cases on digital, but had seen them originally on the glass. So we would always scan at time 60 if we were looking for H. pylori as a result of that. And the second area for caution was around dysplasia. Two cases of where dysplasia had been overcalled on digital. This was one, it was called dysplastic bronchial metaplasia on the digital, not on the glass, and we don't think it is truly dysplastic. I think the reason for that is that the nuclei do look quite dark against a very bright background on the digital system and look more dysplastic as a result. The other problems which we had really were around the speed of data streaming, which we think we've sorted out now is due to the way that the network was running, not particularly the connectivity, but the access of data to individual profiles. So the system in Coventry constantly checks whether individuals are allowed to view the data they're requesting. And that was slowing up the streaming of the digital data. So we removed it from that network and placed it on another one, which has cured that problem. All of these systems have some tiles which are out of focus. We've certainly experienced that, but it didn't seem to cause a major problem in terms of diagnosis. But we did have a problem with recognizing the color and DPAS stains. So we calibrated all of the monitors to ensure that the color was correct. And we had one instance of pathologists who suffered screen fatigue, and this was cured by the fitting of privacy filters, and that was a very successful change. They became one of the most productive members of the group as a result of that. Otherwise, I think it works pretty well, but there remain a few challenges to adoption in routine practice. The interface with the limbs is still ongoing in Coventry. We hope to get that running soon, but we really can't use it in anger until that's been put in place. Each laboratory will have to develop their own scanning rules about how they handle cases and what magnification they're going to scan them on. And inevitably, when you make a change like this, the laboratory protocols have to change. People have to adapt to a slightly new way of working, which always causes some degree of problem to start with. There are indeed some things that you still and we'll continue to need glass to do properly. So examining polarization, under polarized light rather, can still only be done with a microscope. This system hasn't really been validated for cytology, although it does work quite well. We didn't include cytology formally in the study, and it was unable to scan oversized slides, so the large blocks still have to be looked at under and on glass. Okay, so let's just move on then, and just having demonstrated really that this system is as good, or very nearly as good as a light microscope. The question remains really is why would you digitize? What advantages does it offer? And because bearing in mind, of course, that you're introducing something which is going to cost you quite a bit of money. And really they form into the two groups, the economic advantages and the quality advantages. We've covered a little bit about workflow management and how that can improve your efficient use of pathologist time. And we'll talk a bit more in a minute about the quality advantages. But one thing which we hadn't foreseen, which I think will make a difference to digital pathology and will be important for the future, is remote reporting. So we had thought it might be useful for home working, and we had thought about how that might work, and we've now realised that actually this is becoming a very, very important part of the whole project. The remote working is established by a RAS token secure login that enables you to access the secure network of the trust for many sites.